I see the like hormone blockers, the trans kids, that kind of debate going on, and it's difficult for me really to take a position on either side of that because I don't necessarily know how much harm is being done.
Those numbers
Ledger.
can't exist yet because
Mhm.
you have people that have trans regret now, but that's people that have, been trans. The long-term numbers are people that have been trans during a time period where society itself was weeding people out, telling them not to be trans.
Like if you're gonna dig into the studies and give us the answer to those numbers, Sitch is saying you can't have those answers.
Right?
So would you be against giving kids um the ADHD medication then? Because you
I'm
can never
against
tell. I'm wondering if Adam
No,
is.
misdiagnosing.
not at all.
I'm
But
against misdiagnosing all kids. Okay.
so
Of course.
I think I
Wait,
think
come on. No, 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 no. Stop.
yeah.
Hunter said he's only going to stick around for about an hour. We've talked for about 30 minutes. I know you want to talk about the trans stuff, and I saw one of your debates, and I really can't remember who it was, but you've been debating this trans stuff a lot, and I'm curious because I see the like hormone blockers, the trans kids, that kind of debate going on, and it's difficult for me really to take a position on either side of that because I don't necessarily know how much harm is being done. And it seems like they're both sides of the debate, the conservative side and the progressive side, are focused on harm reduction. So I'm curious if we can talk a little bit about that, and if you can like lay out your understanding of the conservative position on why they're against like hormone blockers, transitioning kids in their teens and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So sure. I think that some of them are just some of it is just a fundamental misunderstanding. But I also think that there's a legitimate argument there too. So I think the fundamental misunderstanding is this idea that like kids are being castrated, kids are being chemically castrated, they're having their genitals cut off. Anything like that is
Yeah,
like I
that's
right
not
away.
true.
Right, that's not true. And even like the way the guidelines are set up, surgery is not supposed to even be like introduced until minimum of 18 years old.
But
Right.
the
So
hormone blockers are real though. That's a real
the
thing.
right. So the more I guess like contentious argument right now, yes, is about puberty blockers. And
Yeah.
that's what's usually given to kids around the ages of, well, whenever they would begin puberty, right?
Yeah, totally.
Um,
The surgery thing, that's only for bottom surgery, right? Because I know that there have been, I mean, I remember Louis Theroux did
Mastectomies, yeah.
yeah, he did a thing about trans kids, and there was like he had a couple of 14-year-old girls who got both breasts removed.
There definitely been, and see, this is the same thing I would say to like kind of like what we were talking about with the censorship thing. There is going to be like mistakes made. There's also going to be medical malpractice sometimes.
But that's
There
harm.
actually,
That's totally harm. That's
I
that's
agree,
that's the
but
crux of what I want to talk about because I don't, a lot of these debates I don't see that each side is in good faith arguing about harm reduction, that's really what they're talking about. I see
right,
a
but
lot
the
of people
medical mal
mischaracterizing the conservative side is like not caring about people when they do care. I mean, they care, they care about these kids that may, be accidents like you're saying.
Well, so that's why I was kind of hoping to just finish what I was saying. There's because of course, there's can be medical malpractice, but that can happen in any medical field, right? So
Sure.
it would be kind of silly to point to that as an argument against the actual treatment, because when the treatment is effective, when the treatment is done properly, then I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. When the treatment is done properly, it is extremely effective.
Hmm.
I have a really interesting study I can send you, especially Adam, since it sounds like you're kind of curious about like
No, I'm
what are
not.
the
I'm not curious remotely. I just like the thing that I'm interested in is there are a lot of people going into these debates with a lot of certainty that I feel is unfounded. Like you're looking to this study that you have that you're going to send me that is like the ironclad proof that your position is correct, and I'm a
Well,
little more
well, no, I'm not
cautious
saying this
about
is
that
the
kind of thing.
I'm not saying that this one study means that my argument's correct. The reason that
Well,
I
okay.
hold this study particularly though to rather high esteem is because it used a proper control group. So
Hmm.
they took trans individuals, right? And they
hmm
were all properly diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And then they gave some of them trans actually, you know what? I think I might be referencing the this is hold on. I think
Well, you
that
don't have
might
to
be-
send it. I'll just
Yeah.
trust you.
Well,
'Cause-
I want to. No, I know, but I want to make sure that this is. I think this might be about people that actually transition in adulthood.
Because I just want to lay out because I think I'm not exactly sure what
I
Adam's
can still
position
send
is,
it to you.
but I mean my position is not that people shouldn't transition, and I do completely agree that people that have gender dysphoria can and in some situations and many situations transition and it will make their lives better. That's not really my position that transitioning surgery is necessarily wrong. It's just that I feel like it's being overprescribed. That's my only position.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
false
and-
positives, and there's not necessarily a study that will give us the level of false positives that we're getting.
Right.
Not yet.
Well,
at
that's
least.
actually not. That's not true. Actually, we've looked at. There have been better studies now that have been done. A lot of the times, for example, you'll see people throw out these studies, right, that show that like people that have gender dysphoria or people like desist from being trans. Like, look at how many kids desist from being trans. Like, oh, and these surgeries are being handed out so quickly and like irresponsibly. When in reality, a lot of those studies that are hyping up the numbers are going based on referral rates, not based on children that were actually diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And when you look at kids that are actually clinically diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which is a long process, keep in mind that for adults, you have to have consistent gender dysphoria for 6 months. And for children, it's even more. Like, so it's not just like you're walking in one day to be prescribed this stuff. Now, there was a really interesting, I want to address this because I have a feeling this might come up either from you guys or in chat. There was an interesting CBS documentary recently that actually showcased some trans people, right? That, or I guess they went in and they were misdiagnosed, right? And a lot of conservatives were using this to more or less push the anti-trans narrative, or to say that it kind of affirmed their idea. And when you actually looked at the full documentary and looked at the intention behind it, it was actually talking about specific clinics that were violating the WPATH guidelines. So those clinics being underfunded and everything else were what was making the mistake. The actual guidelines
They were
like
making misdiagnosis. I'm just to clarify.
yes,
The clinics
they were.
themselves.
Some of the some of the
this
clinics
was the
were-
60 Minutes thing where they had like some people were talking about
Yeah.
that they went in twice and then they gave them the prescription or
Yep.
whatever. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it absolutely, like, that was a huge problem. And I literally talked about in my video that like
Yeah.
that's fucking terrible. That shouldn't be happening. The treatment is supposed to be it's supposed to be much more extensive than that. And
Right.
the understanding of if they are gender dysphoric, that also is supposed to be like a much more extensive process. And the main premise of that documentary was how these individual clinics that are underfunded and sometimes also have individuals that are more just kind of like they see trans people as like something they're curious about rather than like people that need help, right? And a lot of that can contribute to some of that issues, some of those issues. But if I were arguing with a conservative, I would not say that that's proof against transgender treatment. I would say that's proof that these clinics should be better funded. And also, when we're being clear, they're only like I think they're hold on, sorry, I got distracted by something I saw in my chat.
Okay.
But yeah, I would just say that like if we're gonna look at the way these clinics are acting, then that's an argument for why these guidelines should be followed, not that treatment is bad. I could just as easily, right, like send you a this like study I have about people that went through treatment for cancer, and so there's like a relatively high regret rate even for women who've like had their breasts removed and everything else. But we would never say that that's proof that chemotherapy is bad or that cancer treatment is bad.
They had
That's
cancer.
a little bit less subjective, right? I mean,
well, yeah,
they
I know it's
die
not a
if you have
one-to-one.
cancer.
I know that that's not a one-to-one comparison, but I'm just saying that we can look at like regret rates of other treatments as well.
Sure.
And that wouldn't be an argument against that treatment in its entirety, right?
Well, there
Just
wouldn't
like
be the
if you-
misdiagnosis component. Hey, where are you at on the social contagion argument? The counter
Well, hold on.
argument?
I want to address the thing about the clinic, the 60 Minutes piece. Is that to me that shows, because again, I'm not against people transitioning, but I do feel like, especially coming from a lot of the trans activists, that there is this pressure on a lot of these doctors to just say, okay, you have to be 100% trans affirmative, 100% gender affirmative. Like you can't because the doctor's role is supposed to be to try to actually figure out whether the person has gender dysphoria or not. Because unfortunately, we don't have the magic brain scan, the magic test that you can just figure this out. And so it seems like a lot of the trans activists want to pressure doctors to saying, oh, I don't want to jump through hoops to become trans or to start my treatment. Just give me this stuff. And it seems like those clinics are sort of the reaction to that. Like they're falling prey to the hype. And that's what my concern is.
I mean, that's, I guess. Trans activists are, some of them can be pretty stupid. Sure. Like they might be advocating to like just start giving out the treatment or whatever. But generally speaking, the way the guidelines are go about it's supposed to be a process of diagnosing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't have a problem with I mean, I don't know the W guidelines you're referring to. I don't have a problem with like the DSM guidelines or anything like that.
Right. Well, yeah, and then so yeah, of course there can be improvements there. I think that like again, it's easy though to hyper focus on the mistakes, right, that happen here and there. If you look at it on a statistical level, you'll see that like reports of medical malpractice from like gender clinics are extremely low. If you look at it overall, it's easy to hyper focus on like a couple examples where something wasn't done right or where guidelines were not followed to try and make this argument, or at least, and I'm not saying you're doing this, I'm saying generally
I understand what, yeah, right.
It's easy to incite fear. It
we're
does,
talking
like,
about
some of it
false
sounds kind of
positives,
scary.
though. False positives are not necessarily medical malpractice. I mean, they can be if the false positive is from just moving too fast, I guess. But there are people who, I mean, if they feel that they want to transition and then they later feel that that's a mistake, that I would categorize that as a false positive.
It kind of would be both. I think the medical malpractice would be putting them through treatment so quickly.
Too fast, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that I would argue would be the medical malpractice.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, that's why you're supposed to be like meeting with your doctor. And I guess we're talking about people under the age of 18 here. So the people in that documentary were also over the age of 18.
Yeah,
but again, even the guidelines there is different. Yeah, like they signed consent forms and everything else. But like even the guidelines for adults are supposed to be a minimum of 6 months consistent gender dysphoria before any kind of like actions are taken. So it absolutely was medical malpractice on that part. But like I was kind of saying, is it's easy to hyper focus on that, but then we can also look at it on a broad scope and see that the majority of trans people that transition or go through treatment end up having a better quality of life. And the argument in favor of puberty blockers is that if you have a child who has gender dysphoria, okay, and let's assume that their gender dysphoria doesn't go away, okay, for the sake of this argument, if they already, their gender identity is like disconnected from their biology, going through the wrong puberty has been shown to really exacerbate the gender dysphoria and also raise the likelihood that that child will commit suicide as they're getting older. So that's usually the argument in favor of the treatment, which is here are puberty blockers. This medication has been approved by the FDA. It's also been used on cis kids. I think since the 1970s or the 1980s, kids sometimes have an issue called precocious puberty. Yeah. And so with that, they were able to do a lot of studies also.
Do you have numbers on the number of detransitioners versus the number of the happy trans kids?
Oh yeah,
happy transitioning.
Yeah, if you want, I can send it to you now.
I mean, that's a big question for me, because it seems to me the conservatives are worried about false positives, and that's why I bring up the social contagion argument, because it seems like the strongest argument that the conservative side has, and there's been a ton of studies on social contagion. So I'm curious where you're at with social contagion.
Well, yeah, and the argument that if you give people puberty blockers, then they definitely won't desist.
Yeah, because they've made a psychological investment that's so great that it's less.
Well, not just a psychological investment, but that going through puberty does change the structures of your brain.
Oh, that too. Yes, that too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the Lauren Southern argument, is that like puberty is what's going to make them do that. There's not really any studies on that. Yeah, people can change over
Lauren
puberty.
Lauren Southern is doing studies on puberty now.
No. Lauren Southern made that argument. Lauren Southern made that
I
argument.
I didn't realize she made that argument.
But you're right, and that's to me.
You couched it like she was the researcher diving into this.
No. Yeah. But you're right that there hasn't been a lot of studies on this, and to me, that's where my trepidation on this
Yeah,
comes
totally.
forward,
Well,
is
hold on.
because
I have to stop you. I'm sorry. There
okay,
haven't been a lot of studies about what?
on comparing, like, okay, if you have people that display gender dysphoria and they go through puberty, how many of them are going to desist if you do nothing, and how many will desist if you give them puberty blockers?
I would argue that
heard
we
someone
have.
say a study was like 80% though. I think they do
Yeah, because
have
I
some
no,
numbers on that.
the
No,
study, yeah,
that
'cause
that desistance rate is based. I know what study you're talking about. That
Okay.
desistance rate is based on referrals. It's
Right.
really, and again, keep in mind that if you have a lot of referrals, right, that shows that the clinic's doing its job. They should be sending people away
Well,
that don't have gender dysphoria.
But it could also be a social contagion thing if you have a lot of referrals.
No,
I mean,
because
it makes both arguments.
usually no, not that it wouldn't be a social contagion thing, because the referral rates, the way that they're collected is based on has been for a long period of time, like since the 1970s or 80s, when they actually used to classify gender
It'd be
dysphoria.
before social contagion.
Yeah, it was like,
okay.
and that's another reason why you'll see studies sometimes that show that quote unquote desistance rate being really, really high. And it's because back in like the 80s or the 70s, I don't remember the exact dates, I'm sorry, but they had a really broad brush that they would consider possible gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder back then. And so like sometimes if like little boys put on their mom's shoes, they might get like sent to this clinic to get checked out or something. Like they had a huge fucking broad brush. They've really narrowed it down. And also the clinics have gotten a lot better as well. This is a study right here. And this guy is, let me see.
Do you have a position on social contagion? Have you looked into it or anything?
Well, I'm happy to talk about that. But I first just really quickly want to read this to you.
Mm-hmm.
It says a new study by Turbin and other researchers from the Fenway Institute and Harvard Medical School found that 13.1% of currently identified transgender people have, quote, detransitioned at some point in their lives, but that 82.5% of those people attributed their decision to external factors such as pressure from family, school environments, and vulnerability to violence. That's another thing too, is the reason for desistance is oftentimes more than not linked to discrimination rather than like an actual change in identity.
These are people that already transitioned, right? You said.
Yeah, and these were also people that were confirmed gender dysphoric,
right?
Kind of showing that when they are gender dysphoric, when they're confirmed that way, the majority of them do go on to pursue more treatment or further transition later on in their life.
But so
were they
has
adults?
Has there been a study doing comparing what I talked about, comparing children who said that felt that they're gender dysphoric, and comparing desistance rates between kids giving puberty blockers and kids given nothing? Because that to me would be a very key issue or key study.
That would be. I've seen one that was similar that Lauren Southern sent me that tried to argue that during this age period you saw like a higher rate of desistance, but that wasn't linked to puberty. It was just like during this certain age. And puberty.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming if it's the ages when puberty happens, it's
Well, no, but it was I think it was like 12 to 14. Like it was 2 years out of like the whole pubertal process. Like it. And also the study that she provided me was not even had not even made any kind of correlative or causational argument to puberty.
Right. But I would imagine that you'd agree that a study like that should be conducted so we can figure this out.
I mean, I don't want to like get into Googling. I have my LGBT notes here from previous stuff.
I'm not saying you should do it this moment. I'm saying if one doesn't exist, it should be done.
Yeah, but I also think that there could be some ethical issues there.
Yeah, totally.
That's another.
I can see a ton of ethical issues.
Well, I guess that's
and that's
part
another
of the
reason.
Yeah, sure.
And that's another reason why actually we see people like conservatives complain like about a lack of research on puberty blockers. And even though I think that we do have a pretty decent amount of research on it overall, part of the reason that there isn't more research is because of how sketchy it is to be like doing like, you know, medical experiments on children, right? Like that's got to be fucking, that's yikesy.
It's medical experimentation on both sides of the argument though, because the conservatives will argue that using, you know, these puberty blockers and when you could be in a situation where it's a social contagion or there's some kind of false positive going on. I mean, there's harm on both sides of the equation.
No, would have to contest that.
This is
there's
the one.
Much
this
more
is this
science.
This is the one thing that I want to get clear here, because So you are basically taking the position that your side is focused on harm reduction and the conservatives are like just out to lunch on the fact that there could be children being harmed by false positives. They're not actually gender dysphoric. They're doing it because all their friends are doing it and it's cool. And they end up getting like a double mastectomy before they've even gone through puberty. Well, I guess obviously they would do that.
But that would be
puberty,
the huge, that would be more or less like a straw man of like,
so
what
let's
would
let's
happen
get
if
let's
every
get rid
guideline
let's
was
get rid
ignored
of
and
that
everything
straw
else, like-
man then. Let's
talk about it. Yeah, the social contagion thing. So I can pull up my notes here on this too. What usually happens with the social contagion thing, there absolutely is research that suggests that social media can sometimes make people like think that they have a disorder that they don't have. That's not necessarily just with gender dysphoria, though.
I
That could
agree.
be like
Depression,
like
all
anxiety.
kinds of things.
Yeah,
Anorexia is a huge one.
right. And so that's like possible for sure. But again, that would be an argument as to why the guidelines should be followed, why the clinic should be better funded, the kind of in that direction, right? I think that when
weeding
we look
out
at it
these false
overall,
positives.
right. There are not very often times where it's like a result of social contagion, even though really controversial.
How can you say that though? How can you say that though?
Because I have my study here that showed that like it can. Hold on, I can pull it up for you.
So there's literally a study on the social contagion effect because.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's multiple. I mean, there's a lot of research on here.
I read Abigail Shire's book on this, and she was saying that there were virtually no studies on this stuff, and that's part of the problem. Nobody wants to study it.
Well, was she the? I know Abigail Schreier.
Yeah.
She made the book. Wrote the
I
book
probably
on
should have had all my notes up
damages.
beforehand. I apologize. I'm
Well,
trying to
you know,
find this
I'm
now.
not trying to argue the point. Really, my whole point of bringing this up is to make it clear. And you've claimed that you're a centrist and that you understand both sides of this argument. You're a former conservative. It seems like you're the perfect person to actually understand that there are both sides arguing for harm reduction here, and that there's a simple equation. It's like how many. If we miss some trans kids, some kids that actually have gender dysphoria versus, how many kids are getting false positives and going through some detransition process that they later regret. If one
which we do
group
have that,
is,
though, but we have
do
data
you,
already.
Do you
on
have the numbers? Do you have the numbers? Is it like 1,000 on this side of the ledger and like 2,000 on this side of the ledger?
Those numbers can't exist yet because you have people that have trans regret now, but that's people that have been trans. The long-term numbers are people that have been trans during a time period where society itself was weeding people out, telling them not to be trans.
Well, you're making my argument though. Sitch.
I know
This
I am making an argument. I'm saying this is why those studies can't exist. Because the people that long-term studies about desistance rate would be during times where society was anti-trans. So you'd imagine that there's not people falling prey to social contagion in the 80s and 90s and even in early 2000s to be trans. But with
I'm
now,
trying to still find my social contagion thing, but I do have another study for you about
you're totally diving into the studies, Hunter. My whole thing is like if you're gonna dig into the studies and give us the answer to those numbers, Sitch is saying you can't have those answers. My whole point in really bringing it up is, and one of the reasons why I don't feel comfortable debating this topic is because I don't think you can know these types of things, and so many people's lives are involved here in so many ways that
but you have to fit, but don't, like what that's just not that's
you
not
have
really
to
good
know
enough, right?
you
Because
have to know something that you can't know. That's my thing.
How are doctors supposed to handle children with gender dysphoria?
Well, they
should have to know. They have to follow what the data is suggesting right now, and that's how the medical field works. So they do know. They know that more or less puberty blockers have been shown to be safe and reversible, and that can sometimes play a role in saving the lives of people that are struggling with gender dysphoria. Right?
Yes,
so
yes. I agree with all of that, but you don't. There's also this detransitioner. Like if you're
all right,
catching.
Can I read this really quick? This is a survey study of surgeons.
I would be more interested if you acknowledged like the wider point that there literally could be 1,000 trans kids that we miss, or we make this whole early puberty blocker treatment illegal, and 1,000 trans kids suffer for them. But you're weighing the maybe 2,000 kids that get false positives and go down this transitioning route and later regret it, become sterile. So,
but
I mean,
that's
do
what
you
I'm disagreeing with you in, is that there's the majority of kids that are confirmed gender dysphoric go on to transition. Like, we're not seeing 2,000
Hunter, can we
right?
just slow down for a second here, okay? Like, I don't think you're really understanding my point here. There is a group of people. There are two groups of people that are at odds with one another, that are both going to be tangibly harmed. Right?
No. Wait, hold on. So Hunter's saying that he doesn't buy that there's a strong likelihood of the harm on the other side, that there are all these false positives.
There is a possibility of harm, of course, but like,
you're saying
we
that
have to look at the majority of trans kids who have gender dysphoria go on to transition. We also know that the majority of the times puberty blockers are used, they're safe and reversible. So there's not that much harm. Like, the worst that could happen.
I don't buy the reversible.
Well, no, but they're not. Okay, but wait, pause. Here's the problem. Okay, again, there's not been long-term studies for people that have transitioned in the last 4 to 5 years, when trans stuff has really blown up and completely changed the social attitudes about that.
I'm not even sure if that's true. I do have this study
there
right here that I
literally
kind of wanted to look at.
There couldn't be. There physically couldn't be. How could there be long-term studies on something that just happened?
This is just
here's a study of. This is a survey of from surgeons who have.
Can I ask you a hypothetical, Hunter? You keep diving into the study,
because this is really important. This is something else that kind of lends to the fact that regret after gender affirming surgery is exceedingly rare. That's the conclusion of this study. They surveyed surgeons from all over the world, and they've treated over 22,000 trans patients. And yeah, it concluded that regret after gender affirming surgery is exceedingly rare.
What is the time period of this?
Let me see here.
Also, there's a conflict of interest because you're asking surgeons who don't want to.
Yeah, totally.
No. This was anonymous. This was sent.
Still, I mean, I'd rather ask the patients than the surgeons.
But they already. Well,
it's hard. I assume it's hard
also
to track
have
the patients down.
Well, we have other studies with patients that show that.
No, but you understand my point is saying that there literally couldn't be long-term studies because we live in a new environment the last 4 years that hasn't existed. And
I want to know patients treated. There was one patient with regret.
You're making the argument
so that's 62. There were 13 patients who regretted chest surgery.
What year is this though? That's the
background.
Because you understand
2016 through 17, it looks like.
Right. So, but do you understand my point that there couldn't be a long-term study on this at all yet in our current environment?
On regret rates?
And I want to know what the break is for you, Hunter.
On regret rates under the completely new social environment that is pro-trans when society used to be anti-trans.
I mean, I'm trying to understand. I know that you're saying there's not that many studies on it, but like from the studies that we have available, they're all pointing towards my conclusion, right?
No, I'm saying you can, if you had like a study, you say, okay, we're looking at the last 20 years, okay, of people that have regretted transitioning, right? And I would say it wouldn't surprise me if there'd be very little trans regret in the last 20 years, because those people that have transitioned, for the most part, transitioned in a time period where society was anti-trans. Okay, people were not accruing.
Be more likely that they would detransition then?
No, because you would say, if society is telling you that you shouldn't be trans, and yet you still have the internal feeling of gender dysphoria, I would imagine that would weed out most of the false positives before anyone ever goes to a doctor, right?
Well, I actually have one that kind of answers your question right here. This is a cohort of gender dysphoria study from 1972, when the social conditions were anti-trans, going into 2015. When suddenly it was a lot more pro-trans. Only 0.6% of trans women and 0.3% of trans men who underwent the surgery were identified as experiencing regret.
It still doesn't matter because
So what I'm saying is you would have to compare now that society has totally shifted. So now that people do accrue positive social benefits for transitioning,
Okay, I mean, yeah, of course there
right.
could 100% be more in-depth studies done. There always could be, right? But this is kind of I don't know if this is a disagreement, but this is kind of the crux is, yes, there could be better studies, but we also have some pretty decent studies now that reaffirm my conclusion, which is that the regret rate seems to be pretty low. We also know that since puberty blockers are for the most part reversible and safe, there's not really that much risk of harm necessarily. The biggest harm that I think could happen here would be depriving people who have a mental illness like gender dysphoria from the proper treatment, and then they go on and commit suicide. And that's also what's been shown statistically to be more likely to happen.
But I want to know where the break is. Let's say that there's 1,000 people in this situation who have this, they're put on puberty blockers and they transition and they live the best possible lives ever. 1,000 people. And there's 5,000 people that get caught up in some social contagion. They transition. We don't know about them now because they're doing it right now. This happens 5 years down the road. And those 5,000 people end up totally regretting their decision and they commit suicide, which, I mean, obviously it seems you would have to be more on the side of the harm reduction for the 5,000 people than the 1,000 people.
It also depends on what you mean as far as treatment goes. Are you talking about people just going on puberty blockers? Because then if they regret it, they can just go off the puberty blockers. If you're talking about people getting surgery, then that would require months of like...
I know, but I've seen it would be different for every single individual. I mean, there are people now on YouTube that have transitioned and say they regret the puberty blockers. That it's made
But of course
changes
there have been. There's going to be people there's people that regret going on SSRIs also. It's not really an argument against it.
Sure, but do you understand what I'm saying? Like the 5,000 people versus the 1,000 people. That's all. I'm just trying to make sure that you understand the argument.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, but
you could really literally be arguing for a more harmful position right now and not know it.
But that's what I mean. It's all a hypothetical right now for you.
Yeah, but
I have the numbers. I have the data. And also you have to recognize that there's a threshold. There's a threshold for how we diagnose this, right? Like, it's not like all of a sudden just because suddenly it's cool that we're just going to like be diagnosing people more often. I think that
the numbers
you literally earlier said people, Hunter, you literally earlier said people transitioned their political affiliation because you did it and they thought it was cool. Okay.
But
I mean, social contagion is real.
No. See, this is what, hold on. That's a massive difference than a medical thing. People changing their beliefs because one of their favorite YouTubers changed their opinion is a hell of a lot different than someone watching their favorite YouTuber and then all of a sudden going and deciding to become transgender. All right, come on. That's really ridiculous. Again, this is why we have the stipulations and the guidelines for how to diagnose people. I think
the study on social contagion is very real. The WHO, the World Health Organization, has different guidelines for media reporting celebrity suicides because of social contagion. Okay, we've known about social contagion for 50 years.
Of course, yes. I'm not saying that social contagion isn't real. I'm just saying that overall, it doesn't seem that we're seeing this massive uptick of social contagion.
You don't know people that. How do you know that though? You have such certainty.
Because but the reason I have certainty is because what we have right now, the numbers that we have right now show that that is not the case. Rapid onset gender dysphoria, for example, was coined in 2016. We've been able to look at this now and study it for a little while. We see more people that are maybe seeking out like referrals to clinics because, again, society is more accepting. We're going to see people that are comfortable now being themselves. Conservatives try to use that as like an argument, I guess, but even rapid onset gender dysphoria, like that study that was done was such a faulty study.
But
I mean, you said that
this is a little, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is a little bit of where I see the mischaracterization of the conservative position, because I believe
help me understand better then.
Well, I believe the conservatives are worried about those 5,000 kids that are going to become sterile and have terrible lives. And a lot of times the left, I'm not accusing you of this, Hunter, but I'm saying that the left...
Wait, I just really quickly want to say, because this is...
So much talking past each other, okay?
No, actually, Adam kind of proved my point. So this is what I mean, is I would argue that even if the conservative was making that argument, right? I would say that fundamentally their argument is more likely to lead to harm. And my argument for that would be that you're basing that on a hypothetical. Perhaps there's 5,000 people that are going to regret this. What we can't base something on a hypothetical of how it could happen in the future.
You're basing it on you don't know, though. I mean, you don't
I'm
have
not.
hard
I'm basing
facts.
it on I'm basing it on these cohorts of studies showing regret rates. I'm basing it on the research done on trans individuals and the most effective treatment for trans individuals.
Don't have.
So wait, stop. So we're just looping because the question I posed was never answered.
Yeah.
Which was that you can't have long-term studies for trans regret rates under this new paradigm of having a very pro-trans society.
Yes.
And Abigail Shriver's argument, which it sounded like you were sort of alluding to, was that if why are we seeing this huge explosion of young people who want to transition, but not really seeing a huge explosion of older people who should be transitioning if it's just a question of society becoming more open and accepting of trans people?
Yes.
I mean, if you're really concerned about social contagion, then that would be an argument for why the clinics should be better funded and the guidelines should be followed.
Well, we don't necessarily know that. Like, they can be caught up in the social contagion too, though. That's the thing.
Okay, so let me give you. Okay, so what happens then if we go with that direction, right? There could be 5,000 people that regret this. So why don't we just put a halt here on this treatment for now? Well, now what if there's 10,000 people that are struggling from gender dysphoria and they all went on to kill themselves?
Hunter, thank goodness you finally got the argument. That's all I'm saying. Like, obviously, if there's 10,000 people on the other side, then we should, go with the 10,000.
So what would I have to show you then? Like, I do recognize how it seems a little bit like we're talking past each other here. The thing is that all the data and evidence that we have reaffirms my conclusion, and your only argument seems to be, well, I could be wrong in a hypothetical future.
Well, you're pointing
not true.
To,
you don't have the full data set.
You're pointing to data that
doesn't exist.
Really relevant to what we're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
So then I would once again say, if the argument is we should
your
put a
data
pause
might as well be tea leaves.
No, that's not true. But what I would say is, if your argument is we should put a halt on treatment that has been shown to work for the time being, because a possible hypothetical could prove us wrong down the line, then I would argue, that's a really dumb argument, and that's leading to more harm.
I wouldn't argue for a halt. I would argue that we better be 100% sure that the kids have gender dysphoria.
We're not 100% sure of anything. Never.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. It sounds like you are 100% sure of a lot of this stuff.
Wait.
And that's
how does it sound like
discouraging.
I want to ask that. Hold on.
Well,
how
does
it come across that way when I'm on here? Like, I'm trying to find new studies. I'm trying to address your arguments. Like, come on, man.
Well, no, but you are. There is a certain data set that does not exist yet. That I don't necessarily know that
we can point to data sets that don't exist yet all day long. We can do that all we want, but that's not how we make decisions. We make decisions, especially medical decisions, based on the data set that we do have.
Right.
And we can't just say we don't have data, so we shouldn't do this thing, or we don't have data, so therefore everything I say is wrong.
But you're literally you're making decisions based on data that you don't have, though. Like, we're taking shots in the dark here. Help me out, Sitch.
Okay, what data do I not have other than a study of desistance rates starting from the year of 2014 to 2021? Other than that
is the only thing that you don't have, and the only thing that would make you certain.
Well, no, there's the other thing, the other study that doesn't exist, which I talked about, which would be to compare kids on puberty blockers desisting versus kids on puberty blockers.
Yeah, but if we're talking about
which
harm
I agree
reduction,
with, we can't get that.
Really
we never can get that.
I understand that.
It's unethical. We can't do that.
But this is, I mean,
so this is just literally,
Adam,
you're appealing to ignorance right now. Like, you're just saying because we don't know, therefore I'm right.
Well, okay,
like,
so
this is
again, I'm not exactly sure. For what Adam's end goal contention here is, my end goal contention is just, I don't have a problem with people transitioning. I just think that the atmosphere and the activism around it is pressuring these clinics to just be 100% gender affirming. And so I'm on board with these clinics having strict guidelines that they need to follow and all this other stuff. I'm just afraid that they're not following them and they're being politically pressured to not follow them.
Yeah,
That's
they're
my
being
contention.
pressured. Yeah.
Sure. And if that were
Like
to
trans
happen,
people were once pressured not to transition. Like now it's flipped. It's the opposite.
well, I agree that, that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah,
Of
shouldn't
course,
be.
that would be bad. That would be a bad thing. But thankfully, if we look at it on a statistical level, it doesn't seem that there's very many reports of medical malpractice, and overall the treatment does seem to be effective. So
I guess we'll have to see.
We will find out. We definitely will find out.
So is this really the
it's
argument,
coming.
guys? Come on, like an appeal to ignorance, pretty much, is because we lack this
how-
one
I
data
don't
set.
know-
You're
Well,
unsure
it's
about.
not an appeal
Well, yeah.
to
Well, how's it an
ignorance.
appeal to ignorance?
Well, first of
I
all,
don't-
I'm not sure.
Like,
Pointing
how
to
are we
data that's
appealing to
not
ignorance?
relevant is not
How
better.
is it not
than
relevant
us
when I'm
saying,
giving you
just-
regret rates from 1970s to 2015?
That's not. I explain why that's not relevant.
Okay, all right. I
and you
mean, it's
ag- and
that's
you
a really.
agreed, and you agreed with the logic I was using. You didn't disagree and say that's wrong.
I don't disagree necessarily. I think that more data is always a good thing, but I mean, even this study I quoted from the Harvard, where it showed that the majority of people went on to transition. I'm not sure when exactly this was done, but I know that it
you
was
were actually
recent.
the one making the appeal to ignorance. The appeal to
Really?
ignorance
Well,
is an
no, I
assertion
understand-
that
I under-
position
look,
is
I
true
understand
because
why-
it
stop,
has
hold on,
not
hold on.
yet been proven
Hold on.
false by
I
a
understand
proposition.
why Hunter thinks that you're making appeal to ignorance, because a part of the conversation is I feel like you think we're arguing a position that we're not.
Yeah,
You feel like we're
totally.
arguing this people shouldn't be transitioning whatsoever argument, which is not my argument, and I don't think that's Adam's argument.
No, not my argument.
And,
at
we're
all.
not against.
I don't think that that's your. No, I don't think that
Okay.
that's your position. I know
Because
that
it
you
sounds like
guys
that's
are.
who you're used to arguing against, is that they're saying, oh, well, we're going to insert doubt into this conversation to say that we shouldn't do it. And that's not either of our positions.
No,
Then-
not
but
at all.
I thought that your position, maybe I'm misunderstanding, because I thought your permission was we don't know. So why should we do it if we don't know? Didn't
No,
Adam say
no.
something along the lines like that?
That's not my position. Is that the activism around this issue is basically infringing upon the medical community's position to treat patients as if they have a medical condition. That's my position.
Again, that would be bad, but it just doesn't seem to be happening on like a massive scale that would like warrant
Well, I mean,
like
it's
this.
it's happening. Whether it's actually impacting the medical community is a different issue.
Yeah,
it's
that's a big
you see it
question.
happening on Twitter. You see it happening on YouTube. You see all this stuff happening.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
And the studies on
Sometimes,
social
sure.
contagion.
You
are
can also,
just-
but
mean,
I feel like well, it depends on what study you're talking about, social contagion. If you're talking about the rapid onset gender dysphoria.
well, no, I'm talking about the suicide ones. The social contagion for suicide. Suicide is the best metric because I mean, if if you're killing yourself, that's probably more harmful than transitioning, I would think. So if people are getting in some sort of social contagion and actually suicide rates are spiking because of it. I mean, this happened with the show recently that they had on Netflix that they had to cut that
13 Reasons.
glorify. Yeah, they had to
So
cut
would you
that
be in
because it was
favor then
glorifying
of like,
suicide.
would you be in favor then of like there being more gender health clinics like around the country? Like right now, I think there's only like 50 in America. So like,
Well, it depends
if we're really
upon the
concerned about
outcome. I mean,
social-
if it's creating, if people are caught up in the social contagion, it's actually creating more. I mean, that's like saying, okay, we're in a social contagion atmosphere for suicide. Let's do more suicide boosts. I think that would be the way to go. It's like maybe not.
if we had
Maybe
more
suicide
clinics,
boosts are
right?
the
when-
things to defund.
if we're concerned about there being a social contagion issue, right? And we're concerned that people who don't actually have gender dysphoria are going to be given some kind of like life-altering treatment because their friends were doing it or something, then I'm asking if you would be in favor of there being more gender clinics around the country, because that would ultimately benefit that, right? Because
I don't-
what we
but
need
I don't
is
know the
more gender-
atmosphere.
So hold on.
So, okay, let's make it
premise
a
here-
hypothetical then.
Let me
A clinic that
explain-
follows the
let me explain
WPATH
the
guidelines
contention.
correctly.
I already can cut through the contention here. So when you say more gender clinics, you're conceptualizing gender clinics that are going to properly, follow whatever the medical guidelines
Yes,
are. And
I
to
am
weed out
100%.
all the people that are false positives. And Adam's contention is, well, he doesn't necessarily trust that the gender clinics are going to
Are
be
doing that, yes. If
Right.
the
Because
gender,
again,
if the gender
like,
clinics
we
are just
already
gender affirming, like if they're the church of transitioning, then that's not good. But I mean, if they have some kind of MRI machine that they can put kids into and go 100%, okay, this one has gender
Now
dysphoria,
you're making the
this one doesn't.
hypothetical again.
Well,
This is
but just
this
to make
is what
the
I mean
point.
is listen. I know the point you're trying to make.
No,
and
no,
I also
I'm not
recognize
sure that you do. Do you?
Yes, I do. I can literally tell it back to you.
So, okay,
You're
let's
concerned
do
about
it.
there being a climate of social contagion. So you're worried that if we put more gender clinics in, that's going to just be more social pressure. And so more people are going to get false positives and start transitioning. That's your concern. And I understand that.
Versus the other type of clinic. Go ahead and explain
Versus
that one.
a clinic that would be following the WPATH guidelines, right?
And
which
also,
is the way it's supposed to be.
There's a little bit of, because like we don't have the machine that can tell 100% if someone has gender dysphoria or not. Like that would be great. Obviously we don't have it, but you understand what I'm saying. Like there's a spectrum between, we know 100%.
What you're saying is because we don't know 100%, it might be bad, is my understanding of what you're saying.
Well, no,
am I wrong?
I'm saying if we knew 100%, I'd say build one on every street corner, for heaven's sakes. Okay. You got to weigh the plus and the minus.
So should we never give any depression medication to children because we can never tell for 100% if they have depression?
It's hugely different. I mean, we're talking
How?
about potentially you can be sterile from these drugs. Like
should we give them ADHD medication because we can never tell? ADHD medication has literally been linked to sterileness in kids that like consistently use it for years on top of years.
That's a good example.
Sure.
I think of what Adam's talking about is that, I mean, you.
So are you against giving
kids
ADHD medication?
Well, no, we all know this is that there's been this explosion of, over-diagnosing kids with ADD. Everyone has ADD now. Everyone's, lining up to get their speed, which is basically what these medicines are. And these are all supposed to be following this medical guidelines, right?
So would you be against giving kids the ADHD medication then? Because
I'm
you can never tell. I'm wondering if Adam.
No, not at all.
I'm against misdiagnosing all kids. Okay.
So
of course.
I think.
Come on. No. Stop. I need to talk to Adam here because
Adam 2021. Never bad things.
Never misdiagnose children.
Of course, we don't want anybody to be misdiagnosed.
How dare? Is that a negative? Did you throw a negative stereotype of weasels out?
This is called.
Please,
this is a textbook.
do not. Weasels are my spirit animal.
This is
how dare? How dare you? How dare you, good sir?
That Adam's Patronus animal is a weasel. Okay, so
yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Please, I do not like disparaging stereotypes about weasels.
I think
it triggers
it's not a stereotype. You're actually being kind of weaselly right now.
You're summoning your Patronus.
Hunter, I will answer any question. I don't want to.
No,
I don't want to.
Here's the
let me know.
I would like to know if Adam would be okay with giving children ADHD medication or depression medication because we are unable to tell 100% that they have that, and that medication could cause them to be sterile.
It depends upon, like, you got to do a cost benefit. Why are you giving them the medication? Because they're having trouble studying? No, fuck them.
No, Adam, you're the original. Look, you've lost.
So then we have the option. So then we don't know 100%. So you're against giving. Because we don't know 100%, you're against giving the medication. That's your argument.
What is the medication for, though, Hunter? Don't you understand? Like weighing the pros and cons. Like, what is the pro? What is the upside?
So why wouldn't we do that with the puberty blockers thing? That's what I'm trying to do. We are doing pros and the cons.
We are doing. Yes, we are doing the same thing, the exact same thing. Go ahead, Sitch. What are you trying to say?
No, I'm saying you, Adam, you've lost track. Your original position, and you sort of fallen into these other positions, was just about the certainty of this. Now, obviously, we live in the real world. We have to make decisions based on the best evidence we have. No one's gonna argue against this. Okay, but Adam's contention,
except Adam kind of is, but okay.
Well, my contention and Adam's contention about this is just that there seems to be this certainty, this idea, this emotion of certainty about this, when there really isn't. And I brought the example of, the ADD.
So what would certainty?
I'm not saying that kids shouldn't be given ADD medication, but if we look at the trends in psychology, it's very fashionable for there to be some diagnosis that's way over-diagnosed for a period of 5 to 10 years, and then we cut back on it.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm worried about.
So I understand that. Okay, that's cool. So what would it look like then? What would having a little more certainty there look like to you, Adam?
Well, I'm interested in you having just a teeny tiny bit more uncertainty. That's all I'm interested in, Hunter.
I mean, I feel like I came on here and I straight off the bat admitted that there have been mistakes made, that sometimes
totally. No, I completely agree.
Of course, I recognize nothing's 100% perfect. Like I feel like I have agreed with you, and I'm not saying I'm 100% certain on this, but I'm saying
you've been great.
Because what the data suggests thus far, and what the data overwhelmingly supports, is this position right now.
No, now you just jumped. No,
Okay, so but before we repeat,
That is
the
what the
argument,
data
I guess-
no, let's not
I would
repeat.
like to know-
Come on. I feel like I'm in the
I just
movie
wanna know what
Tenet here. Please stop.
Adam, please. I want to know
Who's
from Adam.
who's inverted here? Is it me or Hunter?
Do you like the movie Tenet, Hunter?
I've never seen it. I just want to
No.
know what
You
Adam
have
would
to see this
consider-
movie. You have to
I
see
would just
this
want to
movie.
know what Adam would consider being certainty in this medical field, at least.
Well, this is really the difference between conservatives and progressives, because conservatives want more certainty and progressives feel they have that certainty.
I don't.
And
know
I
if
just
I
I
agree
feel
with
that
this at all.
certainty is unwarranted. What?
I don't think there's a progressive conservative difference in wanting certainty. I don't.
So what would certainty look like?
Well,
Because Adam's your
listen.
main concern seems to be that we're not totally this treatment that I'm making sound certain about, like puberty blockers, we're not actually that certain about. So what would certainty look like to you?
Well, obviously, if we had the machine that could diagose gender dysphoria,
So
from
what
an
would a
MRI, that would
realistic
be great.
certainty look like? What would realistic certainty look like?
Listen, I'm not. My only point in bringing this up is that it bugs me that people are conflating the conservative position with being, oh, they just don't like trans people, which I'm sure there is a number of conservatives that do fit that definition, but I think most of them, and particularly some of the people I've seen you debate, they seem to be more interested in harm reduction in the same way that progressives are interested in harm reduction. So, but I
don't know. Your position right now would lead to more harm, at least based on what we
you
have.
don't know that. Oh my God. Sitch, please. I just discovered
So,
I'm
I know,
inverted. I'm
because you
going
don't
back
know
in
it.
time
You think that
again.
makes you right. That's not like we could just as easily say you don't know that 10 years down the line, all these people that transition are going to be living way better lives and they would have killed themselves.
I mean,
know.
they could all be
Oh, God.
lizard people in 10 years from our
I know.
vaccines. We don't know.
We just got to invert. We got to go back forward in
So
time.
before you go,
Wait,
and
no,
before
I don't want to go yet because I really,
well, I don't want to kill
hasn't-
myself
Adam
on this
hasn't-
Groundhog's Day.
Adam hasn't
Yeah,
answered
totally.
this question yet, though.
What if I not, Sitch, have I not answered
what
the
would
question? I feel like
certainty
I've
look
answered
like?
everything.
Adam,
here.
is there?
What would
well,
certainty
he
look
gave
like?
an answer. He said,
I
is there
answered the
something
question. Do I
beyond
have
the
to
machine?
answer it again?
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm getting a little bit frustrated here. What would realistic certainty look like to you, Adam? Because
Well,
your argument, I want to repeat your argument to you, and you can tell me if I'm correct, okay? Your argument seems to be that we're not totally certain about everything, so we should be a little bit more skeptical about this.
Also,
Is that your argument? So what would certainty look like when it comes to puberty blockers to you?
I don't know. Like, this is something, God, I'm glad other people are making the decisions on this, because there's harm on both sides of the equation here. That's my only reason
it's fine.
for
If
bringing
you
this
don't
up,
know,
Hunter.
you just don't know. You don't have there's no definitive certainty that you have in your mind.
I don't know how you can know. Like, my contention is the fact that Hunter is sitting here saying he knows, he has the facts, he knows how many people are going to be hurt and how many people aren't going to be hurt.
That's not true.
And
Didn't
there's
say
no,
that. Hold on. I did not say that.
Well,
not saying I know how
I'm
it
feels that way.
Hunter,
You may not
Hunter,
have said it,
Hunter,
but we felt it in our guts.
Hunter, I'm being hyperbolic. You've been extremely good faith, I feel, in this conversation. So I am being hyperbolic here, but I feel the level of certainty with you is much higher. Maybe the level of certainty with me is too low. I'm willing to admit that.
It's not just that you don't have certainty, though. It's that would be okay, but it seems like your argument more or less seems to be that we like what is the reason for saying we don't have we have uncertainty here? Like, do you see how that kind of plays defense for people that don't like trans people, for people that do think that trans people are icky and gross? Like, now all of a sudden, okay, that's true. We don't really know that much about it. Yeah, everything is kind of ambiguous. Yeah, we don't really know anything. When, by the way, that's not
Well,
really
those people
true.
those people can fuck off and die. Okay, I don't give a fuck about those people. I give a fuck about the fucking children. Okay, that are actually going to sterilize themselves.
And I give a fuck about the children that are going to kill themselves if they don't get treatment properly.
Here
That's
at the Sitch and Adam
why.
show, Sitch, Adam, and Hunter all care about the children.
Yes,
Okay.
It's just
yes,
it's just you care about the children. So
I
we're
don't.
Not sure.
I do not want to embolden people who want to disparage, trans people. The question
what is
is
your
really over the
solution, though, for this?
trans kids.
Adam
What's
has
that?
no solution. I want to ask you something else.
Well,
before you
hold
go.
on, Hunter.
Okay.
Hunter has no solution. Well, actually, Hunter does have
That's
a
not
solution.
true. I have
Hunter
a
has
very
to- Hunter has a
concise,
solution.
clear, succinct solution.
Yeah, and
Okay,
stay the
okay.
course. Okay. So what I
No,
wanted
not
to
stay the
The
course. It's
stat-
make sure that all
let's-
clinics
let's-
are following the proper guidelines.
yeah, but you're
Hunter
assuming,
is in
okay, whatever.
favor
I
of
don't
the
want to get into
status
it. Look,
quo. Okay,
look,
so I just
okay.
want that to be known.
what I actually want to ask you about. I don't even know why the fuck Adam broached this fucking transgender topic in the first place.
This was a good discussion though, Sitch. You got to. Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show, and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.